Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Thursday to you. Those of you who are joining for the first time, I appreciate you joining in. Those of you who are regulars, I apologize for not being able to get a video out the last couple of days. I did have an urgent family issue to take care of, and things are going to be better, but just have to deal with stuff with family. That's just, that's life. And I'm very appreciative to have all that I have. So, anyway, let's get going and talk about what is coming up here over the next, not only the next day, but the next several weeks. We actually are finally, I know, I hate to say it, it's May 4th, but we're finally seeing an end to winter over, I'm not going to say everywhere in the US. The West will still have mountain snow, but for those of us that have been dealing with all kinds of winter weather in the northern and eastern part of the country, that winter storm pattern is finally coming to an end. It's wrapping up, and we're seeing a flip where warmer air is going to return. It'll finally feel like it should here for April, May, and early June. We will also see, after somewhat of a lull, an increased risk for severe storms and tornado season likely to get ramped back up here over the next couple of weeks. And what could be actually a pretty active summertime here across the upper Midwest, but we're going to start more in the central and southern plains, as you would expect for this time of the year. Here's a look at the water vapor imagery. This shows you guys mid and upper level moisture. It shows you where storms are tracking. There's a pretty well-defined upper level low over Southern California. That is bringing moisture up into the southern plains and Rockies. We also have a trough that's been just stuck across the east, finally getting ready to get shoved out, and we'll see some warmer air in the wake of that trough. Pretty quiet weather across the southeast for today into tomorrow, but all this moisture here gathering over Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, that is going to spread east. And I love to say a weekend without rain, but I don't think that's going to be the case for a lot of us here in the southeast, unfortunately. Here is a look at the current hazards map from the National Weather Service. A pretty quiet map. We have various flood watches in areas where snow continues to melt quickly. We've had a lot of river flooding on the Mississippi River over Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Illinois. And with the quick warming we're going to see over the next several days and the recent heavy snow we had farther north, I don't think that situation is going to just go away anytime soon, unfortunately. So my thoughts are with all of you in the upper Midwest that are dealing with that river flooding. Unfortunately, that's going to be with us quite a bit longer. We do have freeze watches, frost watches, and warnings here in parts of the Great Lakes and the Appalachians. This will likely be our last significant freeze and frost, although certainly we can't rule it out farther into May in portions of the Northeast and Great Lakes as the winds go calm. Fire weather conditions over New Mexico and parts of Colorado, but we have more moisture over West Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas, so fortunately those fire conditions are not going to be as high farther to the east. And we do have some winter weather advisories across the mountains of Southern California. This should look familiar for those of you that were tracking the weather back in January and February. Probably one of our more significant May winter storms in Southern California history, potentially over the next several days. And just look at that. This is just mind-boggling to me. This is the UP of Michigan. This is the National Weather Service and Marquette snow totals. 52 inches in Herman, even Marquette, almost 29 inches. Not only that, but the snow to rain equivalents were about 6 to 1. So a ton of liquid out of this, 6 to 7 inches. That's why we're dealing with all this flooding, just a ton of water coming down with the storm and still the cold air in place. So as the snowpack melts and then kind of replenishes itself, we continue to see all of this water that's just waterlogged basically in upper Michigan, feeding down the tributaries into the rivers. And that's why we're dealing with this flooding. And West Virginia, also a record snowfall. This is from WCHS. And snowfall totals of close to 16 inches in Davis, a foot in Snowshoe, and 16.2 inches in Canaan Heights. And that is just jaw-dropping for West Virginia. Where was this winter when the ski resorts really needed it? Now it's early May. Fortunately, this storm is winding down. So the culprit for the cold air in the east is, there's a lot of different things I look at, but the teleconnections are important. The North Atlantic Oscillation, it's been significantly negative. And what that means is there's a big block of high pressure over Greenland, and that is allowing cold air to get trapped behind it over eastern Canada and the Northeast. Now, fortunately, as we head to the weekend, this number stabilizes and becomes more neutral. And the average of the ensembles does not show any significant rises or falls. We're going to be pretty much near neutral, and this allows that log jam, that traffic jam of that block to finally get pushed out in a more progressive weather pattern. Now, it's not significantly positive, so it's not like it's going to be blowtorch here in the Northeast, but it will be warmer, and this pattern likely continues through the middle of June. There could be a few dips here where we do have cool spells again towards the end of May and early June, but as far as overall winter weather, that is done pretty much in the U.S. In eastern Canada, we could still see snowflakes out of these colder shots even into early June. That is not completely unusual, but the risk of a very big winter storm after the one we've just dealt with is super low at this point. Here's a look at the ensembles. This is the European. You can see over the next week, we see this chill in the east beginning to moderate and above average temperatures, especially over central Canada, but even over a lot of eastern Canada except the St. Lawrence here. But you can see things are definitely flipping, and I talked about that on Monday's video, where we continue to see above average temperatures across much of the plains here through the month of May, while the west will be cool to start over the next week or so, and then warming up some across the northwest. And I know the last couple of summers have started really chilly in the northwest, so this is kind of refreshing to see. And this is right on through kind of the middle and second part of May, but no real extreme on any part of this map. We see transition, we see back and forth, but no big extreme according to this. Now, as far as rainfall totals go, you can see the dry spell we've got in the east is going to gradually let up here as we get towards the middle of the month of May. It looks like it's going to be a pretty active storm track pattern here over the central United States, especially across Texas. And significant rain and thunderstorms in the forecast with this significant amount of rain. And we do have to watch the western Gulf of Mexico. It has cooled off some. However, this indicates that maybe some tropical activity tries to get going. Maybe not necessarily anything organized, but a feed of tropical moisture. And while Florida is not going to be as wet as it was in April, we will have some action as well here to watch over the Caribbean, the Southeast Gulf, and Florida. But overall, we see this extreme amount of rain. This is a pretty significant anomaly, as much as 2 to 3 inches above the average for May, which is typically not all that wet down in here. But with this flip, we see pretty wet weather, a pretty wet pattern here over the south central United States. And there will be times where we get active weather as well across the upper Midwest and the northern plains here, while the Northwest dries out, and that certainly is going to be a nice break in what we've seen recently. Does this guarantee dry weekends in the East and the central U.S.? Really too early to make that call at this point. Here's a look at the upper level pattern. You can see the big ridge over Central America, or Central Canada, Central America. All right, I haven't gotten a lot of sleep. Sorry, guys. Big trough in the west here through this weekend. The trough over the east retrogrades, and that allows a drier northerly flow here into central and eastern Canada. So unless you're in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, this is what you like to see with this warm up coming. If you are in the Maritimes, however, we still have this kind of nagging trough in place here, so it ain't going to be just all that nice. It will still be kind of unsettled here, but overall, this pattern block that we've had does finally let up. And by next weekend, rather than there being a big block in Greenland, we now have a trough over Baffin Island in Greenland, and that allows ridging to take place over Canada and over the central and eastern United States. And when you have this flow out of the southwest, by the way, you will likely see active weather across the area where that flow is out of the southwest, basically in between the trough and the ridge. So right in here, the high plains, Oklahoma, tornado season certainly is maximized in the month of May, and it looks like that could be the case here once again. So storm chasers, of course, will delight. You'll see a lot more videos from me if that's the case. But as we get later into the month of May, there will be ridge and trough kind of fluxes here. Things kind of go back and forth a little bit, but no extreme amount of chill coming. There'll be cool spells in the east. There could still be frost across the New England and northern parts of the country, and certainly in Canada. But we see a progression to more of a ridge in the western United States and the east. So really a pretty warm overall pattern here, with an active storm track over the central part of the country, maybe even the northern part of the country here as we get into the beginning of June. Here's the next 3 days. Rainfall looks to be pretty heavy over the northwest with this storm that's impacting us. Southern Cal, especially the mountains, could see a few inches of rain, and an active storm track building over Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, and Nebraska. and that will expand eastward into the western Carolinas, northern Georgia, Alabama here in time for the weekend. Just what you don't want to hear. More rain in the forecast in the southeast, especially on Saturday. The Storm Prediction Center is starting to get busier again in Norman, Oklahoma, especially today. You can see a bigger slight risk area than recent days. Texas tomorrow. I will zoom in and show you all that here. And this slight risk expands along the dry line from near and west of Del Rio through San Antonio, through the western part of the Metroplex, through central Texas, right on up into central Oklahoma and south central Kansas. And you'll see there actually is a growing tornado risk here later today into this evening. It's not big, but a 5% risk for a tornado. I don't think the ingredients are here for a widespread tornado outbreak, but I would not be shocked if there were a higher end tornado, maybe an EF2, EF3, somewhere in this region here towards the evening. Maybe a better chance, though, to see big hail later today into this evening over central Texas and over northwestern Oklahoma. Maybe close to Oklahoma City as well, and to the west of Wichita, and the risk for some strong winds. And oh, by the way, there will be a marginal risk in parts of the Northwest as well as the Northern Plains into maybe the Omaha region here later on today for some severe weather. Tomorrow, there will still be some storms in the northern part of the country. We will see the area of storms tonight move into the Mississippi Valley and weaken tomorrow, Memphis down to about Slidell and Gulfport. We'll see additional storms blowing up between Dallas and Austin tomorrow, maybe over to the Hill Country as well. And there will be a pretty limited risk for tornadoes tomorrow, especially compared to today. But there will be a chance for some decent sized hail in here. And this will be just west of Waco and south of Stephenville, so kind of right in the heart of Texas here. And there will be a chance for severe wind across this region as well. Day 3, that is Saturday. You can see more of the country seeing green. This is the rain moving east. Florida could see a little bit of an uptick in moisture here. Nothing super organized at this point. We continue to stay active, though, across the southern plains. We may see an upgrade to a slight risk as the models come into better agreement. We also could see more severe weather over Iowa and Illinois. And this area in here is the area to watch through the month of May and into June, as increasing chances for severe weather look to be more common across the upper Midwest, including Illinois and Indiana. Same place that got the dust storm on Monday, the flooding in the mountain on the river, is going to see severe weather. So we've seen quite a bit of extremes. And I know the farmers watching from Illinois and Missouri are certainly going to be raising their eyebrows towards this. As we get beyond Saturday, though, the predictability of any organized severe weather right now is not in strong agreement from Sunday on. So we may see some severe weather, but we're not to the point where we're confident in that just yet. I know I certainly am not confident in it. All right, so here's the plains later on today. We see rain and thunderstorms over Oklahoma through this morning. Nothing organized at this point. Then we'll see additional storms firing up here, especially in parts of central Oklahoma. This is about 3 o'clock this afternoon. And I'll zoom in on Oklahoma and show you, but you can see more storm activity here blowing up as we get through the afternoon into the evening. Some of these storms could have a lot of hail. It is possible we could see a stronger tornado in this region as well. Tough to say where and when exactly. The models do not agree on it, but you'll see the active weather. And as we get into tomorrow, this dives south and east into Arkansas. More storms likely to pop up in the state of Texas as well. And we could see some hailers across parts of Nebraska and sneaking into Iowa later tomorrow, right around the Omaha area up to about Sioux Falls. So basically the Missouri River Valley could see an active storm pattern tomorrow afternoon with isolated storms, but some of them could be locally intense. So that's something to keep an eye on. Zipping back down to Texas here, and I will get that region up for you guys. I apologize, I thought I had this up earlier, but when you have 30 tabs, it's tough to keep tabs on things, apparently. But this is later today. We see the storm action over central and even south central Texas, weakening by the time it gets to the Piney Woods and the Houston area overnight tonight. And then tomorrow, additional storms over Louisiana, Mississippi. A few of those could be strong. And then a more isolated setup here near the Red River for intense storms. Some of the models show them popping up farther south, but right now towards the Red River seems to be where the HRRR model shows things going off here. Here's the HRRR model as well for you guys. And we'll take a look at this morning first. Just an area of rain and a few thunderstorms moving into eastern Oklahoma. And we'll stick around here through the afternoon. Then we see a few more intense storms going, one to the southwest of Oklahoma City, moving towards Moore and Norman around 3 this afternoon. Another area to keep an eye on over the northeastern panhandle, sneaking into western parts of Oklahoma. That's the area I'd be a little bit more concerned with as we get to about 5, 6 o'clock here. There certainly is the possibility of some wind shear picking up here. And at this point, you can see the dry lines are already through, but as we look a little bit farther east, there will be more in the way of wind shear. And at this point, it's showing marginal severe. The air is a little bit dry near the surface, but you can see on this photograph here that the winds do come around from southerly at the surface to southwest. So there is some wind shear involved here. It's about 63 meters squared per second squared or meters per second squared over the lowest 1,800 meters. So there is some wind shear. And as the evening wears on around 7, 8 o'clock, we still have to keep an eye on things around Oklahoma City, Ponca City, sneaking up into south central Kansas as well. So we're going to keep an eye on this. After midnight or so, probably just locally strong winds at this point. Unlikely we see any tornadoes. And then we keep an eye on things across northern Texas tomorrow around Gainesville and Sherman. If I pull up a sounding here north of Fort Worth tomorrow afternoon, we can see the wind shear starts building up, and we can see it's getting pretty unstable here. But with a very dry mid-level of the atmosphere, this favors hail over tornadoes at this point, but something we're going to be watching for you guys. Here's the storm relative helicity. I'm going to try to zip through this a little bit quicker for you guys here. You can see it does start picking up over Kansas and Oklahoma. Whoops, sorry about that. It's not super high, but it's more conditional. But any storm that does get going here will have some helicity to tap into during the afternoon and evening hours today. That's a different model. That's a NAM model. I'm not going to show you every individual model. They're in pretty decent agreement at this point. Now, as we get beyond this time frame here, this was yesterday's model. Let me pull up today's. We'll see that this storm continues on east into Tennessee and Kentucky here. This is tomorrow afternoon. There could be a few thunderstorms in here, but mainly a soaking rain over Tennessee. And it gets into the western Carolinas here tomorrow afternoon, and especially tomorrow night. And there could be a heavy rainfall somewhere, maybe around Spartanburg or Brevard or Asheville. And that's certainly not going to be pleasant as we get into the start of the weekend here. Just a wet day over the Carolinas. Additional rain is going to move through the Tennessee Valley on Sunday down into South Carolina, Georgia, and really along I-20 here Sunday evening. This is 7 o'clock Eastern. We could see a little bit more organized severe weather. Tough to say based on one model run, but we see more pulse type activity and maybe an organized complex of storms somewhere in here. West Central Florida shows that as well, and the upper Midwest, we could have a few stronger storms. We've got pretty good upper low that's going to be here Sunday evening, front that's going to be right in here and draped across the Ohio Valley. And in the warm sector, we have that threat for maybe some severe weather. As we get into next week, more active weather starts moving into the Great Lakes and eventually over New England and the Northeast Tuesday into Wednesday. It'll be warmer, so we could see some storms at that point. But overall, this is not a terrible week across the eastern U.S. next week. We just have this storm in the beginning of the week that we're probably going to be dealing with, and hopefully it's out of here by the middle of next week. But look how busy the plains look like they're going to get here again this time next week. Here's our upper level pattern. You guys can see the ridge building into the Great Lakes here. This was what was with us all winter. That's why it was so warm. You see the trough over California. This is like what we had in the wintertime. The ridge does break down and shift back to the west. This enhances our risk for severe weather over here along the top of the ridge from South Dakota to Ohio. This is the middle of next week, and we continue to see this ridge amplifying. So we'll continue to have individual threats for storms shifting north and east with time into the Great Lakes and upper Midwest, but continuing on this dry line here over the high plains as well. Here's a look at that CAPE that shows you where the storm fuel is going to be. This is the risk of 500 joules per kilogram of CAPE, that's storm fuel. And you can see kind of overall how it builds eastward here over the weekend into next week. So we'll have more active weather next week in the southeast, according to this. It gets suppressed a little bit, but builds right back here on Thursday into Friday into the Dakotas, Iowa, Minnesota, and even into next weekend. So while the Northeast doesn't really cash in on too much of this, the Mid-Atlantic, the Southeast, and especially the Ohio Valley and Missouri Valleys do see that better chance for storm fuel. So I do have to believe there will be some severe weather in multiple waves here. Now, most of our snow the next week is going to be out west. We see a significant amount of snow in the Sierra Nevada, the Cascades, the Tetons, the Bitterroots, these areas. The east is pretty quiet aside from maybe a little bit of light snow in the northern New England mountains into parts of the Maritimes, but pretty much winter over in the east here. I know the ensembles try to bring it back a little bit west here towards the middle of the month. Again, that certainty level is pretty low. We see cloud cover as well over the next week is going to finally build up here in the southeast, and it's going to stay pretty cloudy in the northeast and Great Lakes. So not the best sunbathing weather here in the upper Midwest just yet, but it will be warmer. However, as we get to next week, we see more sunshine moving into much of the eastern part of the country. There will be afternoon storms, but this is kind of a sunnier pattern here in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic region for the second half of next week. Finally, we'll look at temperatures here. And you can see that warm up coming, 80s across Alberta and Saskatchewan, Canada, 70s and 80s over the central and northern plains at the end of this week. Still kind of cool here in the Northeast and New England, but it's back into the 60s this weekend, so we can't complain about that. Should be a nice weekend in Maine. 60s again here on Sunday, 70s in the Southeast, mid 80s into central parts of Illinois, upper 80s in Texas. And then we'll start warming up in the Southwest again here next week. Well, actually, much of the country next week looks at near to above average temperature. So winter finally over. New England kind of back and forth, but overall we're warmer than this week, so we will take what we can get at this point. Finally, I wanted to show you kind of the state of the tropics because this is interesting. I did put out a video a couple weeks ago saying that I do think despite the El Nino that's predicted, we're still going to have an active storm season in the Atlantic. And I have every reason to believe right now, despite that El Nino, that this upcoming hurricane season is going to end up more active than last. We had such a shutdown here in July and August last Atlantic season. It threw a lot of forecasts for a loop. I don't think that shutdown is going to be here this year. You can see over the last week, we have this southwestward kind of push of warmer than average surface temperatures on the sea surface temperatures here. This is not with respect to average. This is the change with respect to average, so going another degree above it. And this trend shows us that the Atlantic development region is warming up faster than it typically would. I realize that the Gulf and the Atlantic coast are cooler based on the weather we've had. I don't think that's going to stay that way with that ridge building in, but this trend certainly is one to watch. The other thing too is we're not just right into an El Nino. Yes, we came out of La Nina, but over the last month or so, we've kind of stabilized at this point. There's transition in the Pacific ongoing, but we're not going straight to a Super Nino. We could by the winter time, but this summer, I still think that we'll be kind of more in the neutral zone. We'll be in kind of a flux. And until we go to a strong El Nino, we definitely can't shut down the Atlantic for seasonal storms this year. So if you're in the Gulf and on the East Coast, I just tell you now, start getting ready because I do think we will have at least one impactful storm, maybe a few impactful storms this Atlantic season. Thank you all so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. If you could subscribe to my channel, I appreciate that as well. I have a Facebook page. I will retweet as well on Twitter, Joshua Severe WX. And I don't just thank you all, but I want to thank the Lord through my Lord, through Jesus Christ, my Savior, who allows me to do what I do every day. It's my calling to do this, to just share how important the weather is and how it impacts people every day, but also how important my faith is and why I do what I do every day. It's very easy to get discouraged in this line of business when the weather's quiet or when you deal with family things like I do. But I just go to God every day and thank him. And I'm happy to pray for you all as well. Revelation 21:6 says, he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. The reason I put my faith in God every day is knowing that I am a child of God, that God provides, that no matter what, he is the one who is the deliverer. And if you are a person of faith, you already know that, but it's easy to get discouraged. I'm happy to pray for you. If you're not a person of faith, I'm not here to judge you by any stretch because I was not a believer for the first 30 years of my life. However, I found somebody in my life who wasn't going to turn their back on me and who was going to give me the eternal promise of heaven through his son, Jesus Christ. And I was happy to finally accept that gift. And I pray that maybe you're in a spot where you could do the same. So thank you all so much for your time today. And I really hope you have a great Thursday. May the 4th be with you.